Blackpool, England. 2:17 a.m. It started as a sound. A low, raw pull in the air. Not loud. Not sudden. Just something deep and unnatural, like the whole street had been hooked from somewhere above. Then the houses shuddered. Windows rattled. Lights flickered. People woke to the feeling that something outside had gone badly, impossibly wrong, and then Starfall Street moved. No explosion. No warning. No sirens. One moment it was an ordinary row of houses in Blackpool. The next, it was gone. 20 seconds later, Starfall Street was orbiting a dying star. No engines, no escape, just one row of houses spinning in the black. And out there, beyond the burning light, is something was watching them. At first, they did what anybody would do. They tried the doors, then the windows, then anything heavy enough to smash through. Nothing worked. Glass cracked, but would not break. Locks turned, but nothing opened. Every house on the street felt sealed inside something hard, invisible, and absolute. Panic spread fast. Neighbors shouted from doorway to doorway. People hammered on walls, kicked at windows, screamed for help that could not possibly reach them. The whole street had become a cage. Then somebody looked up, the burning thing hanging above them. That vast, impossible eye in the sky shifted. For one awful second, everything stopped. And then, it blinked. They found the edge of the street by accident. Not a wall. Not a fence. Not anything solid you could point at and understand. Just a line where the world stopped making sense. The first man to reach it hit something hard enough to throw him backwards. Not glass. Not metal. Something worse, because whatever it was, you couldn't see it until it touched you. After that, panic turned ugly. People ran for the corners, the pavements, the gaps between houses, anywhere that looked like a way out. Every path bent back wrong. Every step toward escape carried them right back into Starfall Street. It wasn't just trapped. It was folded, like the whole road had been wrapped around itself and sealed shut. By then, the shouting had changed. No one was asking what had happened anymore. They were asking how long the thing in the sky had been watching, and whether it had brought them here on purpose. The first thing to come through wasn't a monster. Not really. It looked more like the street itself had reached inside the houses. Black shapes pushed through the cracks around doors and window frames, stretching in slow, burning movements like hands made of ash and cinders. At first, people thought it was smoke. Then the smoke started grabbing back. It came in through every weak point it could find. Letterboxes, broken panes, splits in the wood. Gaps no one had noticed until they were full of fire-lit fingers clawing their way inside. Panic turned savage. Neighbors shoved furniture against doors. Families screamed through the walls. Every house on Starfall Street became its own little siege. And outside, the edge of the road burned brighter. Whatever had taken the street wasn't just watching anymore. It was reaching in. By the time people understood what was happening, it was already too late. The things forcing their way inside were no longer just hands. They had bodies now. Tall, blackened shapes with burning cracks running through them like heat trapped under dead skin. They moved like something learning to be human by watching from a distance. Raw in the shoulders. Raw in the face. Raw in the way they came forward without fear, without hesitation, like they already knew nobody on Starfall Street could stop them. That was the moment the panic changed again. It wasn't escape anymore. It was survival. The creatures weren't random. They weren't lost. They had come from whatever waited outside the street, and now it was sending them house to house. Starfall Street didn't collapse all at once. It failed in pieces. First the windows went. Then the roofs. Then whole rooms started burning from the inside, as if the heat wasn't coming from fire, but from whatever had crossed over with them. The things in the street kept moving through the smoke, slow and certain. Not running. Not hunting blindly. Just advancing house by house like they already knew where everyone was. People who had spent their lives behind those front doors were suddenly dragged into the open. And once they were out there, the street didn't feel like home anymore. It felt claimed. There was no pattern to the destruction. No mercy in it either. One house would be left standing, while the next folded in on itself like wet cardboard. By then, nobody was talking about escape. They were just trying to stay alive long enough to see what came next. By night's end, Starfall Street had become something else. Not a neighborhood. Not a road. Not anything that belonged to Blackpool anymore. It was a wound hanging in space. Flames rolled through the houses. Smoke bled into the black. And the creatures kept walking the broken street under that vast burning eye, as if they were part of the place now, as if the street had made them. The survivors hid where they could. Behind nailed doors. Under stairs. Inside the last rooms that still felt almost human. But outside, the thing in the sky never looked away. It watched the fires. It watched the panic. It watched every desperate little life still moving below it. And somewhere in the middle of all that ruin, one truth began to settle in. Starfall Street had not been taken by accident. It had been chosen. By the time anything like morning came, Starfall Street was barely a street anymore. It was burning. Broken. Split open from one end to the other. Houses that had stood for decades came apart in minutes. Walls caved in. Roofs burned through like paper. And the things from outside kept moving through the smoke as if the whole place had been made for them. There was no time left to understand it. Only time to run. Two-eyed. To drag whoever you could into the nearest room and pray the door held a little longer. But the creatures never stopped. Again and again they came out of the fire. Through broken windows. Through collapsing hulls. Through streets that no longer obeyed the rules of Earth. And above it all, I never looked away. It watched Starfall Street burn, as if this was exactly what it had wanted. The street gave them one last lie. That maybe if they stayed low and kept still, they might survive the night. Then the fire changed shape. What rose out of the ruins wasn't one of the crawling things. It was something bigger. Something closer to the will behind them. And all across Starfall Street, the survivors understood the same terrible truth at once. The eye in the sky had not opened to watch. It had opened to choose. The street gave them one last lie. That if they stayed quiet, if they stayed hidden, if they made themselves small enough, the night might pass over them. Then the fire changed shape. What rose out of the ruins was not one of the crawling things that had torn through the houses. It was something higher. Something closer to whatever will had dragged Starfall Street into the dark. The survivors looked at it and understood, all at once, that this had never been random. The burning eye above them had not opened to watch. It had opened to choose. And Starfall Street, broken, burning, screaming in the black, was only the first. By the end, there was almost nothing left of Starfall Street. No comfort. No answers. Just fire, ruin, and a few who had survived long enough to understand that none of it had happened by chance. The burning eye had opened. The street had been taken. And something inside the dark had learned how to reach back through the void. Starfall Street was only the first. Because while the houses burned and the last survivors stared into the wreckage, another face was already waiting beyond the signal. Smiling. Watching. Welcoming the next nightmare. From the fiery depths of nightmare, a new horror had arrived. Not a ghost story. Not a haunting. Not something waiting patiently in the dark. This one tore a whole street out of the world and left it burning under a dying eye in the sky. Starfall Street. A place where doors no longer opened, where windows looked out onto fire, and where something from beyond learned how to reach back. You could lock your doors. You could bolt your windows. You could pray it passed you by. But once Starfall Street had been chosen, the nightmare had already begun. The end. If you enjoyed this nightmare, please subscribe to the channel and like the video. There are more stories waiting in the dark.